Greetings, Starfighter. You are about to listen to the totally super awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast. Always remember, no matter where you go, there you are. Ready Player One.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another 80s Reboot Overdrive episode. And once again, it isn't Dave driving the bus, it's Jesse. But Dave is a passenger this time. Hi, Dave.
Hello, I am on just for the fact that I want to talk about all the gross things that 80s aliens ate during TV shows.
Yes. We are in tonight's episode, or today, depending on when you're downloading and listening, we're talking 80s science fiction TV. And so I threw this out as a topic, and Dave said, yes, that sounds great. Joining us also is Lou.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, it was great. You might know Lou from our Stephen King in the 80s episodes, along with his Stephen King podcast and Farscape podcast. And so we are thrilled he wanted to come on and keep playing in the sandbox. And we also have Scott.
Hello. Good to be back.
Yes, and Scott, of course, frequent guest and contributor as we've talked music and Stephen King, and so kind of fun.
Well, since I got all you guys on, I got to tell you, those Stephen King podcasts, awesome stuff. You guys are fantastic, wealth of knowledge on that, so great job.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
you know, Lou did the heavy lifting. I will tell you right now, if I did not know that Lou, first off, is one of the nicest people I know, and secondly, I knew that, man, you know, talk about a ringer. Here is someone who does a Stephen King podcast. You know, if there's any way to get someone doing this, it's going to be him. And luckily, he was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. It's a blast.
Yeah, the 80s book one, which is the one that's been posted already, it's just awesome to listen to. I've got the 80s movie one for the King movies. It's in the hopper, but I know it's going to be just as good. So
thanks.
So yeah, it was fantastic to listen to. Good job, guys.
Thank you. We had a lot of fun talking about it. It was and you know, as Lewis mentioned, it's kind of amazing, you know, how many books he did. But as we talked about, he's kind of stayed that input. You know, he just is a writing machine, except you know, now that he remembers what he writes. So tonight we're going to talk about science fiction TV in the 80s. We're kind of, what I did is we all did some research and looked for shows, and so we're kind of going to go not in necessarily in any specific order. We're just going to talk about, you know, as the shows. I'm sure we've missed some, and if you did, you can email us and let us know. I forgot to, Dave, I forgot to tweet about this, so keep an eye on if you want to send a tweet out about it. Let's see if we get some shout-outs.
All right.
As we're recording. So our only rule is that it was on sometime during the 80s. So, for example, Doctor Who certainly didn't start in the 80s, but it had episodes in the 80s. And Quantum Leap, you would mostly think that is a 90s show, but it actually debuted in 89. So, kind of loose rules, but hey, it's our podcast, and that's where we're going with. Right?
Great.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about my background, and then I'd like all of you guys to do it as well, kind of where you were in the 80s. So I graduated high school in 77, started dating my lovely bride I got married in 84. We started dating in 80. So I did not watch a lot of TV. You know, I was out doing stuff. So a lot of the early 80s, you know, I wasn't home much. I didn't watch too many things. Didn't have a VCR back then. So, you know, you had to kind of be home to see the show. You know, I'd always been science fiction fan, and so certainly some of these I've seen back when they, you know, were originally on, and I've seen them once we got married and we were a little more settled in toward the later in the 80s. I saw a few more things. So, Dave, how about you? TV in the 80s.
Well, I've historically, I graduated in 1989, so that puts my teenage years right smack dab in the 80s. As a, a 10-year-old or 11-year-old up to 18, 19-year-old, unfortunately, hard to say. I was a nerdy, geeky guy, so I wasn't out doing a lot of things. I was inside either playing with my Apple IIe, looking at my comic books, or watching TV. So that means I was watching a lot of things like Star Trek The Next Generation. I was watching Misfits of Science, precursor of some things I'm going to be talking about, Greatest American Hero. So, yes, I was there glued to the TV watching that stuff. And definitely a fan.
All right, very nice. And Scott, how about you?
Well, I grew up in Southern California. I graduated high school in '86, so that time frame was very relatable for me too. As far as TV goes, I did watch a lot of TV. There was some time during high school that I spent a lot of time with friends that I didn't watch as much TV. Right. But like Dave, I also had an Apple IIe that cost me a couple girlfriends actually. Because I was too wrapped up in some of the computer games, and I remember watching a lot, some of these shows. I didn't get into all of them. I loved, V and Alien Nation, a few of the later ones.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's not forget the Atari 2600 also.
Yeah, I was stuck on that too. So,
yes.
And then ColecoVision. I mean, we could go. We need to set up that as a topic soon too. The whole I don't think we've covered that yet.
No, I would not have contributed that. Like I said, graduating in '77, I kind of missed a lot of the video games, except then when Chris, my son, got into them. So Lou, you're someone else who you are closer to my age than theirs.
Yep.
Let's talk about you back in this time period.
Well, like you, I graduated high school when the first Star Wars movie appeared in theaters, so I remember that quite well.
Yes, me
Going
too.
to university and watching that movie about 17 times before, the first year of university.
Mm-hmm.
So then I graduated and started working in '82, and I moved out on my own for the first time, moved from the small town into the big city, moved from a place you probably never heard of, Port Perry, Ontario, into Toronto. So that was quite an adjustment. Shared a place with 4 other guys, so we were... it was our rock and roll days, let's put it that way. And I still had the geeky side. I watched a lot of these shows. I haven't revisited very many of them, and I'm sure if I did, all the comments I'm going to make tonight are surely colored with rose-colored glasses, because I'm pretty sure that just looking at the list of this, as like some of these, I'm going, I don't think some of these have aged very well. But I've seen almost everything on here on the list that we have, and a lot of this, the viewing habits of that time period, again, were quite different for us, because everything was pretty well appointment TV. If you missed a show, you didn't have a PVR. I think VCRs were just sort of coming around during this decade. So that, if you missed a show, you might be lucky and catch it in the reruns, or you just never saw it again, really, until later on, when they, DVDs and things came along, which was much later. So it's interesting just looking at this list, and you can sort of tell that science fiction still hadn't really matured properly on network TV as opposed to what we've been getting lately, for sure.
Yeah. So, and I agree, and I do, it is hard to, it's funny to think about that, my first VCR, I don't even think I could watch one channel while taping another. Yep. I mean, I had to, just tape that, and then, it was amazing when you could watch one channel and tape another. So that's very different, and so it did change it. So let's start out with Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's certainly, Lou and I have certainly Trek was our one of our main sources. We've talked about this before. We did a special tribute to Leonard Nimoy when he died. By the way, they did not do a tribute for him at Dragon Con, and I was a little surprised. And
Yeah, really.
the Trek, yeah, I was actually a little disappointed. I know that when I heard about this happening, I was amazed. The idea that we were going to have Star Trek on TV again. You know, we'd had the movies, and I was just amazed. And we had actually, here's how technology has changed. I actually went to Radio Shack and I bought a cable that would connect my VCR to my stereo, so that the TV sound would come through my, stereo system.
Yeah.
So that I could hear the roar of the Enterprise. Did not know that it was going to be the DeForest Kelley did a cameo that was a surprise. Back then, the internet was not something you even thought about. You bought fan magazines or newspapers. Yeah, Starlog. Oh, Starlog every day. And I will tell you that even that first season, as rough as it was appointment television. I loved it. One of my favorite memories is in 1989, February 10th. My son was born. February 11th, we're in the hospital. It's a Saturday night. And the episode of The Next Generation playing was the one where Riker, they did an exchange where he was the the first officer on a Klingon ship, and the Klingon first officer was on the Enterprise. And I'm holding my new son going, this is Star Trek. So Dave, what are your thoughts of Next Generation? And just as you can tell, I just kind of randomly talked about my love and what I've done for it.
Well, I mean, Next Generation was such a different animal than the original. It seemed a lot to me like it was a lot more formalized. A Picard Captain Picard versus James Kirk. It was such a different kind of play on the characters between each other and the way they interacted. And Picard's was definitely a more formalized type of ship. But
yes.
but that was kind of the differences between the old Star Trek or the original Star Trek versus this one. It played well. And it played, that these guys actually had the formalized job and their job function, and this is, their mission, versus just a bunch of guys that are just out to joyride. Not saying that's what the original guys were doing, but it just seemed like there was more of a structured, military uniform kind of, system around, the Next Generation. And I know a lot of people aren't going to be fans of this, but I have always been a fan of Will Wheaton. Even, Wesley Crusher, on the Enterprise, I wanted to be him. I wanted to be the kid that got to fly the Enterprise. So I was actually jealous of Will Wheaton, not a hater of Will Wheaton. And so for me, the memories of Wesley Crusher has never been a hateful thing at all. So I think any of the Wesley Crusher haters, I don't agree with you.
Okay, very nice. Scott, how about you?
I was never grabbed by the initial series, so I was never really a Trekkie. Once I saw the whole Star Wars thing, though, that spun me into a science fiction kind of a love. And I did watch a little bit of the Next Generation, but I didn't watch it religiously, or I didn't watch every episode. I do remember enjoying it, though. So I don't have a lot of input on that one, other than I know it was more entertaining to me than the original Star Trek series, just because I think it was a timing thing.
Okay, very interesting.
Being a little bit older, the Star Trek stuff was a little bit when was that, in this 60s,
Yep.
late 60s?
Yeah.
So I wasn't even born until 68, so...
Yeah, the 49th anniversary happened this week.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Of the first, next year is the 50th anniversary of the show being on, and so it will be a crazy Star Trek year.
The one thing the one thing that I remember catching me off guard when it first came on was the Klingon being on, a good guy.
Sure.
I think that threw a lot of people. I unless you were part of the scene and following what was going on with the storyline before it came out. I don't know if people were able to follow it. There wasn't really internet to Google search and I don't know what the press releases were. Talking some of the character changes and whatnot that were going to be on the new Next Generation.
So Lou, I think Starlog magazine, had talked about. I think David Gerald was writing about it and talked about that they were going to do this, and so I think we knew that was happening. Yeah. So Lou, add your thoughts, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about Dave and Scott's discussions, and feel free as well.
Okay. Well, like Jesse, I grew up with the original series, so that was appointment television for me. And it's interesting to hear Dave say that the Next Generation seemed like a more formalized series. And I watched every episode. I can't say that I still prefer the original. There's a sense of fun in the 60s version that I think was missing in the Next Generation iteration of the series. Next Generation kind of took the wonder and awe of space out of space exploration for me. It really felt more like these people were doing a job, whereas the original series, and I think it's just that these two shows are reflecting their times. The 60s was, much more free and exploratory time, and people were generally more optimistic about things. So that there was a sense of and you have to look at what was on for Star Trek at the same time, the original series. But there was just generally a more swashbuckling feel about the original series and a sense of humor that the Next Generation got later on. And I think that was one of the major missing elements in the original season that they never really worked on. So it's ironic for me in a way that I admire what they did with the Next Generation as it progressed. And I think it's quite a safe statement to say that out of all the series, I think Patrick Stewart is probably the best actor any of the Star Trek series had. So his version of Captain Picard, which is so different than William Shatner's Captain Kirk, it's quite interesting because I actually get a kick out of Shatner's Kirk, especially the way everybody makes fun of his staccato type of talking and that. But there's things about this Next Generation that irked me all the way through the series, but I recognize that it was a different iteration, different generation. I was glad to see a new generation of fans coming up, but beyond there's maybe 10 episodes that I think are really good. The rest I've never really had the urge to watch again. I think yesterday's Enterprise is probably my favorite episode of that series. That's just a fantastic time travel episode. And, of course, the episodes that featured some of the original actors, when Spock came on for the two-parter Unity episode, I really enjoyed that. The show came full circle at the end, and Patrick Stewart has gone on to do a lot of great things, and he's really the only actor that's had a fairly large profile since that series ended. So I know it's a popular series for a lot of other people more than the original one, but again, I guess what you grew up with will always stick with you. For me, the original was and will always be the best series.
So, Lou, does Measure of a Man, is that your top 10 list?
Measure of a Man, is that the one where Data was on trial for whether or not...
Yes.
Yeah, I'd put that up there, yep.
Okay. Yeah, that was definitely one of my top episodes.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I loved Patrick Stewart, and... I've always loved William Shatner in the original series, and I certainly think that Patrick Stewart is a better actor than James T. Kirk, character. And I think they specifically tried to make this a little bit, more cerebral, and that the captain, James T. Kirk, William Shatner was paid to be a movie star, a TV star, so therefore that's why he led the away team. And and they did a little bit more where, when they did the new thing, the away team wasn't led by the captain. Sometimes not even by the first officer. They would have this a little more delegation. Melinda Snodgrass was at DragonCon, and I got to talk to her and about how much I loved her episodes of The Next Generation, and felt like anytime I saw her name on the writing credits, I knew it would be a great episode. There's been a lot of discussion, but a lot of the thought is she created the poker game, that people started using. I think The Inner Light is one of my absolute favorite episodes.
Yep.
Certainly some great stuff, and they weren't afraid to change. I also liked Will Wheaton's character Wesley. I know that there was sometimes, all shows have to go through a pace to find themselves. But yeah, I was, and I'm especially a Will Wheaton fan now, that when he talks about with great affection his Star Trek background and him writing. And I know a lot of people are like Scott, they believe this was better than the original. I think it was different. I think the acting at times could be better. I think the special effects certainly were better. But there is something really beautiful about those original 3 seasons, and not all of them were great, but there are some that are just amazing that I think hold up really well.
Plus, I don't think any series ever captured the same dynamics that the Kirk-Spock-McCoy relationship had.
Absolutely.
And I find it ironic that the more formalized bonding device in The Next Generation was poker, whereas in the original series it was 3-dimensional chess.
Yes, absolutely.
I always get a kick out of that.
Absolutely.
I would have to say the only place that Patrick Stewart falls short over Captain Kirk is Patrick Stewart never sang Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
There you go.
And, or Bilbo Baggins.
Yes.
Right.
Jean-Luc Picard also did not go around the universe fathering baby,
Or wearing a bad toupee.
That was Riker's job.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
So I do know that Jonathan Frakes has gone on to be a very successful director. Mm-hmm. He's directed some Castle episodes and some other things. That was a really strong, and it's also proved, this wasn't on network TV. This was syndicated.
Yep.
And it was the proof that people would find this episode somewhere. And we were on Saturday nights on Paramount 21, the local channel here, and it was something pretty cool. So we aren't going to talk a lot about Doctor Who, but we had the 5th, 6th, and 7th Doctor during the 80s. Doctor Who was losing steam after, Tom Baker and the 4th Doctor, and then Davison took over in 5th. Colin Baker did Seth, the 6th, and a lot of people didn't like him. And then Sylvester McCoy on the 7th. There was not as much chance to see the Doctor in American television. BBC kind of was, a little bit of tired of the show. But when you think about it, it started in 63 and we're talking the 80s. I mean, yes, it is probably, a show to show its age. Lou, I know how much you loved Doctor Who. Anything you want to share with us?
Yeah, this is a show that, if you look at it on paper, I should love. But I've never been able to stick with this show because I just don't really find the Doctor a very likable character.
Yes.
I think he's a bit of a jerk, so that's always been problematic for me, and I've never been able to stick with that show.
And Dave, we have talked in the past. You have not seen much Doctor Who, and so we are talking after this new season is over. Charles and I are going to give you some 80s Doctor episodes to watch, and we're going to kind of do a crossover.
Okay.
Which I think will be fun. So anything to add, though, while we're discussing?
Well, really, my introduction to Doctor Who, and it was just one of those things that I really didn't... I knew of Doctor Who, and I know there's people that are passionate about Doctor Who, and I never really understood the whole breadth of how passionate people were until I joined Southgate Media Group. And then, I realized that there's just a devout following to the Doctor. I mean, we even do podcasts at a cafe in Elgin that is around, called the Blue Box Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing is themed around Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So obviously, the Doctor's had some great influence. So as part of that, I felt obligated to, get a taste.
Yeah.
So I did the first season that's on Netflix. I don't even know what season it is.
Yeah.
And I went through that, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't, I guess I didn't get embracing, as everyone else seems to be.
Okay.
So I'm interested to see what the 80s Doctor does for me.
All right, that sounds great. And how about you, Scott?
I was just looking for a sound effect on my phone of crickets.
Okay.
Because that's basically what you would be hearing from me.
Fair enough.
I had not even heard of Doctor Who until about maybe 8 or 10 years ago up in Chicago.
A lot of people hadn't. It is amazing to me, and then we'll move on, the idea that this show has become so mainstream, and Entertainment Weekly, puts Doctor Who on their cover.
Right. And I'm sure, like Lou, this looks great on paper for me, but I've just never even given it a shot.
Okay.
It sounds like an interesting show.
Oh, the hate mail we're going to get.
So what I do think it would be interesting, and we'll do this.
The Twitter page just exploded.
Yeah, we'll do this a little bit. We'll talk about, like I said, I think it'd be an interesting, Doctor Who in the 80s episode, and we'll kind of watch, a series, and then we'll talk about it. And it's all good if you don't like it. I understand. I just think it would be kind of interesting, and, it's all about putting up content, buddy. One way or another, right? That's the radio station used to say, it's all about burning segments. All we're trying to do is, we've got so many segments in an hour we got to go through, and, no topic is off the board when you're trying to burn segments. All right, so I did not have a history. Buck Rogers. I recognize the joke, like in The Right Stuff, and I'd never seen any of the original serials. I hadn't read any of the comics or any of the pulp. I loved me some Aaron Gray. Right away, let me tell you, Colonel Wilma Deering, Aaron Gray was hubba hubba to me, and I liked Buck Rogers in the 20th century for what it was, right? It was popcorn, it was fun, and they're not trying to tell great stories. We're just out doing, it was all flash in a lot of ways. Let's put our money on this and not as much in stories. So, Scott, let's start with you. Any thoughts on Buck Rogers in the 25th century?
Well, I remember I enjoyed the show. I was looking at the email that you sent out, and it's interesting that you made the mistake on this one.
Yes, of
1679, which is this has to happen to do with time travel and all forward, of course, but not. But I thought it was ironic that one was the one that was off by 200 years or 300 years.
Yes,
that's good stuff.
Thank you.
So I remember the opening scene of this show. I believe it might have been just on the pilot, but Buck Rogers coming back from space, and he's singing, and probably because I'm from Chicago, he was singing Chicago, My Kind of Town. And that always stuck with me. And I don't know why, that one little bit always stuck with me. Maybe it had to be with the Chicago connection,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Chicago. And it was just... I love the... Yeah, Erin Gray she was definitely hot.
Yes.
And you had that weird little robot, Tweaky. But it was a fun show. It didn't last very long, but I remember watching reruns of it and watching it first run.
Yeah.
When it first came out, because I was like right around 11, 12. So it was perfect for me. And I also think it also makes me remember the original show, the old black and white, which had the worst special effects that you can even imagine. It was really bad. And then it also makes me think of the movie that came out late, mid-'80s. I can't remember what year that was.
That's Flash Gordon.
Oh, that was Flash Gordon.
They're kind of the same.
I'm getting them confused.
Yeah. No, it is very much so.
Oh, wow. I totally confused those two. No, I do remember the one with Tweaky and Aaron Gray, though.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Don't let me forget, there is a Tweaky story that linked to Babylon 5. Dave, how about you?
Well, I want to take a step back for a moment because I didn't bring up a story around Starlog.
Okay.
And I had a letter to the editor published about Star Trek engineers. So it was actually a praise for Scotty and Geordi.
Okay.
So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't remember the context of it, but I am in Starlog magazine. I hope it was published in the 80s. I'll have to dig that out from my archives.
Yes. That is very cool.
But
nice.
But back to the topic at hand. I remember Porky Pig as his assistant and Marvin the Martian, his opponent. We're talking Duck Dodgers in the 24th and half century, right?
Not quite, though.
Okay.
That is genius.
Mel Blanc.
Yes.
But no, I didn't watch Buck Rogers, but I remember that my Cub Scout troop had voted Aaron Gray as their mascot.
Ah.
So she won unanimously, if I remember right. So, but yeah, I didn't really watch the show, but of course, Aaron Gray, of course,
Yeah. Yeah, when she was later on Silver Spoon, and I got to meet her at a convention once, and she was selling a book, Act Right, which was a book for beginning actors about kind of what to do, how to go. She said because a lot of people start acting and you get your first job and you have no idea what to do, and so that's what she wrote. And I bought the book instead of a photo because I wanted it, and she's like, "Oh yeah, definitely get the book." And she was as sweet as can be, still beautiful. I kind of hate back then you didn't have a phone on your camera, and you didn't think to let me take a photo with her, but yeah, just absolutely great. So Lou,
Beady. That's the main thing I remember from the show, besides Aaron Gray, of course. I did see the original black and white as a kid. I think it was like on Saturday morning serials or something. It alternated with Flash Gordon on Rocket Ship 7 out of Buffalo on ABC.
Nice.
If anybody knows that. And the series, I remember, I think you called it pretty well, Jesse. It was a fun series, very comic booky, and again, it shows the mentality of the networks for the type of science fiction shows that they were still putting out, because this one was pretty silly at times, and but that was the roots of where it came from. So I know they made changes in the second season, I think, to try to boost the ratings, and they added a character. He was a hawk or something, Hawkman kind of character, and he had a kind of a cool ship, but I really don't remember any specifics about it. But I thought Gilles Gerard had a personable kind of charm to him that worked well with the Buck Rogers character. I don't think he was a great actor, but he had the physicality, and
yes,
he's kind of like a forerunner to Wayne. And in no way he's the same kind of athlete, but he reminds me of Dwayne Johnson kind of with his, he had that kind of charisma. So it was a fun series, but it never really stuck with me after it was done either.
Not in this timeline, but I was talking to the original Starbuck on Battlestar Galactica, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, but he'll come up in a minute. Yeah. So it was Apollo then. That's right. Yeah, it was.
Richard Hatch.
Yeah, Richard Hatch, and he was talking about that the rebooted series was so amazing to see. They wanted better stories in the original in the 70s, and they just couldn't. And this was so cool to see that. So I'm sure both Aaron Gray and Gilles Gerard would have liked a little more depth, but it just wasn't going to work. I vaguely remember watching the Martian Chronicles miniseries. I remember being excited because I had read that collection probably in high school.
Probably. Yeah.
And really liked it a lot. For those of you who don't know, it was a collection of short stories that Ray Bradbury had done that set on Mars, and it wasn't, they were all very different, but they kind of together told a series of tales. I don't remember much about the miniseries except that I was excited to see it, and I kind of probably wasn't excited afterwards, but was like, okay, well, at least it was on there. Lou, how about you? Do you remember anything?
I don't remember the specifics of the miniseries. I think it was fairly well done. I'm looking at IMDb TV, and it's got a 6.7, which is pretty good. I remember Rock Hudson was the headliner, which was, I guess he had already done some Macmillan and Wife maybe by this point. So, but it's still, he was a fairly big movie star kind of name. So it was impressive to get him attached to this project, and they played it fairly straight. And I just think that the state of special effects, even though the Martian Chronicles doesn't require a lot, but it did need those special effects to establish that we were on Mars and not on Earth. So I think that's where it kind of stumbled a little bit. But I don't have much here, but I'm just kind of going through the cast. Like Bernie Casey, Darren McGavin, Roddy McDowell, Bernadette Peters, Joyce Van Patten, Maria Schell, Fritz Weaver. Like this is a solid cast. So
absolutely, and as a side note, Dave, miniseries in the 80s might be a good discussion, because even though Ruth and Rich Man Poor Man were in the 70s, I think the 80s is when miniseries kind of found their own, and then they went away, but might be something to discuss.
All right.
Okay.
We'll make a note.
Yeah. So how about you, Dave? Any thoughts or memories of this? And it must have been a pretty major mini-series, because as we talked about, the cast is pretty good.
Exactly. I mean, I'm looking at the cast, and you're right. I mean, it's a fantastic cast, but honestly, it did not even cross my radar back then.
The only reason it did me is because when I did the Google search of 80s science fiction TV, this came up, and I went, oh, yeah, I remember that. So, and Scott, how about you? More crickets?
No, I remember it. I vaguely remember it.
Yeah.
I remember being excited that it was coming on. I must have seen commercials of an upcoming event or something, but I can't recall anything about it right now. I'm reading the brief summary of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, chicken pox. They brought chicken pox to Mars and killed off the Martians.
Yes.
Like such a simple thing that we've dealt with all our lives here. So
yeah, I remember the short stories were really good, and there were some that were kind of scary. I mean, not in a you guys who love horror way, but they end up going to Mars, and they're meeting all these people that they, it's kind of like it's a version of heaven, and there's a surprise ending, or not that surprising, and I now want to throw that on my Kindle and reread those short stories.
Ray Bradbury was an amazing writer, so
yes,
and I recommend that. And if people are not aware of who he is, you should also check out either The Illustrated Man or Something Wicked This Way Comes, which was made into a movie, and not a bad movie either. Yes,
and I want to F Ray Bradbury, not to belittle his legacy, but pretty funny video. So, I'm sorry. I think of the short stories first, always. Yeah. But then I do think of that video. So, all right. So here's one of the big ones. I can remember I got married in '84, but at the time, my brother-in-law, Clayton, who married Linda's sister, I was over at his house, and he said, "Yeah, there's this mini-series that's amazing," and he says, it's got this whole thing about unlike, it's kind of similar to Nazi Germany, where they blamed all the problems on the Jewish people. These aliens are blaming everything on scientists. I remember being captivated by the miniseries. I caught, I guess, the second, and then they would replay them, and I loved the heck out of this series. And then, I remember being excited about the follow-up, and then the series that kind of lost a little bit. It was just so cool. So how about, Dave, how about you?
This is one of the precursors of my lead-in for the podcast today, because, we had aliens that enjoyed things that we as normal humans would find gross. And this was a perfect example of that. I mean, we had aliens eating rats, mice, hamsters, and then you fast forward to Alien Nation, where they liked sour milk. Alf liked cats. I mean, what was the theme with the writers of these, alien TV shows?
That is, I think, the line. I think that is the question of the podcast. If we were the type of podcast that created a title, it would be, "What were '80s TV's writers thinking with these weird food groups?"
Right.
Yes.
But yeah, any show that's going to combine the Beastmaster with Freddy Krueger, dude, I'm all in. I'm all in. So,
yes, and I got to tell you, there was a time Mark Singer was the coolest person I thought on TV. I wanted to be Mark Singer so bad, right? He was just the ultimate cool. So
he had the Rick Springfield hair going. It was just exactly.
Absolutely. Okay, Scott, how about you?
Yeah, I love the series. All of them really. The mini series was a lot of fun. It really sucked me in. You were surprised by what they really ended up being. Once you peel the skin away.
Yes.
Literally. But I remember watching it with my little brother, and we got into it, and we loved it all. Couldn't wait for the next. It was, how many episodes was the first miniseries? I didn't get to see that.
I think 3, maybe. I'm not sure.
1984, 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Only 3 episodes. I thought it was longer. I must have. So I do remember just not, anticipating the next episode and waiting to see it. And I also remember seeing the commercials for it before it came out and being very excited about it, just because I started getting more into the science fiction side of things.
Right.
Especially after Star Wars and the second one and the third one, and it goes on from there. So I love this series. It was fun.
Yes, Lou.
Yeah, V is, I think, next to Roots is the miniseries that made the biggest impact on me. I mean, and it's also, I think, the kind of the turning point where the writers and the networks were starting to take science fiction a little more seriously. I mean, using this as an allegory for Nazi Germany was just brilliant. If Erin Gray's the poster girl for the good girls in science fiction, then Jane Badler had to be the poster girl for the bad girl, because she was pretty hot stuff. And that scene when she eats the rat, I mean, that's almost like the TV equivalent to me of the chest burster from the first Alien. That was such a shocking shot.
Yeah, it was.
And on a bit of a regret note for me, this because one of my favorite novels of all time is Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, which is being made into a miniseries for Sci Fi TV this year.
Right.
That was the first book where I ever saw got the image of these huge spaceships floating and resting over top of all the major cities in the world. So when I saw that shot, I said, darn it, I wanted that shot to be saved for our Childhood's End. So, and now it's kind of become like almost a cliche, because we've seen it in so many other series. But this I also have to put in a word for Faye Grant. She was good too. Freddy Krueger as one of the the good aliens was a lot of fun. And there's an old character actor in here. I think he's the one that does the first V sign. I'll never forget that moment. That was such a powerful moment. And I think he was actually portraying a survivor from the Holocaust. So that that was a double folding of a really powerful moment. So yeah, this series was a lot of fun. I think it got progressively worse with each installment, but this was big news, and I like it because it's kind of marks the point for me where science fiction was being allowed to be more than just ray guns and explosions.
Yeah, Michael Ironside in this, and it is. They were trying to tell a story. And it's easy to think about that now, but back then, it was a little bit unusual. Yeah, and I just everything, just so much awesomeness about it. Now, we all have things that a blind spot or part of our geekdom that we've missed out, and Max Headroom is one of those for me. I certainly can remember seeing the ads for it and, the computer screen talking. But I know nothing about Max Headroom. I'm going to have to just kind of play my cricket sound. Lou, why don't we go to you first and then we'll go around.
Yeah, this is an interesting series. It was the first one to, and now we're starting to get into the advent of where we're able to record TV shows and VCRs and things of that ilk are coming into the mainstream. And Max Headroom was like the first evolution of taking a human character and trying to convert it into a digital character. So the lead character was played by Max Headroom, and the series was kind of a riff on 1984, where Big Brother was always watching, and you had to have your TV on all the time, which we kind of do now anyhow, even if it's not on TV, you either got a laptop or your phone or something like that. So it's kind of funny watching or thinking back about on this show. It tried to be like a crime show, but Matt Frewer, who was played like a dual character, he's been in a lot of great stuff afterwards. There wasn't enough to hang a series around from what I can remember. And again, I haven't rewatched this series, but I remember that the idea of this talking computer character was cool in concept, but it tended to really bog down the episodes because you'd have to stop whatever action was going on and find a TV monitor, which, convenient in this world, there was always one on. But every time he talked or gave them information, it was kind of like a clunky version of Kit from Knight Rider, and that it really slowed the pace of the show down. And there's some good actors in here: Jeffrey Tambor, Amanda Pays, who we know from the Flash series. So it's not surprising that you don't remember it because it didn't last very long, and I think it's remembered more fondly than it actually was quality wise.
Yeah, and I remembered, I just never watched it. Yeah, and I certainly know Matt Frewer from his other work. Dave, how about you?
Yeah, I remember a lot of the marketing hype around Max Headroom. He was like advertising for Coke, and it was just I remember a lot of the iconic of that more than I actually remember watching the TV show. And I actually did remember, I did watch the show, but I guess it didn't stick with me as much as the icon that was Max Headroom. Okay. And obviously, that spelled out to kind of be a significant vision of the 1980s, because it infiltrated Back to the Future movie. If you're a fan of Ernie Klein, it even infiltrated his Ready Player One book, as another shout out to Max Headroom, as a homage to the 80s. So,
yeah, this is the area of MTV too, so that there was that aspect of it as well.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So, and it's interesting that they didn't have the ability to do kind of the computer generated effects to pull that off correctly. So, it was him wearing like plastique, but it was cool.
Yeah. All right, Scott, how about you?
I remember it being tied in with MTV.
Yes.
And I watched the heck out of MTV. and whatever was associated with MTV before they stopped playing music videos. That is,
Right.
Yeah.
once they got into reality shows and talk shows, it's just kind of went by the wayside. But I remember watching this. I don't remember a lot about it. Like Dave, I remember the icon of it. I remember there was a song that they came out with called Paranoia. If you haven't, I don't know if you guys have heard it, but look it up sometime. It's a strange song, but it's Max Headroom basically talking, and or Matt Frewer. Which, a little side note, I remember him. One of my favorite characters that he ever played outside of Max Headroom would be Trash Can Man from The
Absolutely.
Stand. He did a great job.
Yeah, I think there's his style of presentation was closely linked to the Dire Straits' "Money for Nothing" video as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a huge influence from that video. I could tell.
Yeah, I think so, and I do think the icon, like I said, even though I haven't seen the show, I certainly know, the icon and the image, and what they're trying to do. So I put Red Dwarf on here, though I've only seen a couple of episodes. I'm kind of in not something I've done. Anyone a fan of Red Dwarf? I don't want to short shift it if there is.
No, I'm like you. I've only seen a couple episodes, and
okay.
I think it's one you have to start at the beginning, and I don't think I ever caught one of the beginning episodes because I was totally lost.
All right.
Yeah,
Scott?
I recall the name. I don't remember the series at all.
All right, and let's move on to Alien Nation, which
favorite.
I love this show, and in fact, I will tell you how much. I was working nights at the time, working second shift, 3 to 11 at my company. I was a support agent. I can't remember if I did it email or if I called into the radio station, but Ed Bark, who is the local TV critic for the Dallas Morning News at the time, he now does his own website, Uncle Barky TV, he was on the radio station talking about the upcoming fall season. So I must have called. And I said, Alien Nation, is it worth me taping it versus whatever it was against? Because I certainly remembered the movie. And I remember Ed saying, yeah, I think it is. I think this could be something pretty good. I liked this series because I think it was trying to tell more than just, doing just a story of the week. I mean, they talked about this whole, adding the cultures and, what do you do when you're immigrants and all this stuff. So this is on, if we at the end do top shows, I think this is one that's going to make it for me. Let's see. Dave, you want to start us?
Well, this kind of goes into what I was saying before with the sour milk thing. But no, I remember watching the TV show, liking it. You can't go wrong with James. Was it James Caan that was in that one?
In the movie.
Right.
They had. Oh, I'll look up his name while we're talking.
Andy Pantigan.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
But no, I remember liking it just as much as I liked the movie. I'm just drawing a blank for like specifics around the episodes. I just remember enjoying it a lot.
Yeah. The TV show, Kenneth Johnson, who was involved with V, was the creator. Gary Graham played, the human Matthew Sykes. Eric Pierpoint played George Francisco. Michelle Scarbelli played his wife, and I remember she was really attractive, even with the dots. And we had the really cute neighbor. I don't remember her character's name, but there was just a lot about this, the interactions and the family and everything, and the prejudice. Very, very cool. Lou, how about you?
I think this was one of those conflict shows for me too, and I caught an episode here and there, but I don't think I ever saw the entire run of the series. I remember the movie. I thought the movie was pretty cool. And unfortunately, I've never gotten around to seeing the whole series. But I did like the movie, and the few episodes I saw of the series I remember were fairly well done. But I don't have a lot to add to this one.
Okay, very nice. Scott, how about you?
Alienation was definitely my favorite series of the 80s. I loved the movie, and then that they spun it off into the series was just awesome. The like Dave mentioned earlier with the milk, the sour milk is what they use for is a strange thing to drink, but they like to really enjoy it.
Wasn't that how they got drunk? Is that
yes?
If I'm
that is how
right? Yeah. Okay.
That was alcoholic to them,
right.
Or the way our bodies would process alcohol. It got them drunk, and it was I just thought it was so well done. It was a lot of fun. And it was really had a lot of interesting little tidbits on it.
Yeah, there really was a lot of discussion of, and as we talked about the, immigrants coming in, stranger in a strange land.
Yep. Slavery and all that.
Yeah.
It was pretty dark. I mean, it had a lot of very poignant topics.
I can really remember when there was some kind of law, a member of the spaceship that was in charge of, not punishment, and keeping things in line. And the young daughter dressed up as one of them in for Halloween, her first Halloween. And do you remember? And their parents were shocked. It would be, dressing up like an executioner or something. It was just horrible. And Terry Treas, Treas, played Kathy, the next door neighbor. Oh, she looked good in her spots. It was just, and we had Freddie Boom Boom Washington playing a Lawrence Hilton Jacobs. As a Welcome Back Kotter fan, it was good to see someone getting it out. So, yeah, by far. And then they later had some TV movies. Peter David actually wrote some novelizations of the stories. This was a show where they tried to tell important stories and to do things, and I think they did well, and I'm glad that they got to do some, TV movies and follows up. So guys, we're already an hour into this, and we've only gotten halfway through the list, and we haven't even gotten to Misfits of Science or ALF. So I think what we should do is wrap it up for now, and then we'll put the shout out to our listeners. Send us your thoughts and ideas of, your favorite sci-fi TV of the 80s, and we'll give you some shout-outs. We'll talk about it, and we'll come back. So does that work, guys?
Yeah.
All right.
Can't wait. Yeah. Can't wait to talk about Gordon Shumway.
Yeah. So I got to say, Dave, thank you for letting me drive the bus.
Of course. It's always great times.
Yeah, Lou, Scott, great to have you discussing again. This has been so much fun, guys. Scott, how can they get a hold of us?
Well, they can get a hold of us all, I believe, at 80s Reboot.
Yes.
On Twitter.
Absolutely. And
they can get a hold of me at I almost said 80s Reboot again.
Yes.
At Scott's Eye.
Right.
Also, or you can find me on Facebook at Scott Compton Photography.
All right. And Lou?
You could find me on Twitter at LOUWSYTSMA. That's my name, at Lou W. Sitzma. You can also find me over on the Stephen King podcast, or you can find me over at thescapecast.org with Jesse doing the Farscape podcast.
Absolutely.
And I think that's enough information overload for them.
Absolutely. And Dave, I misspoke and asked Scott for the email, but he covered wonderful. So Dave, you want to tell us again how they can reach us?
Well, the Twitter account, yes, I take care of that one. That's the at 80s Reboot. But we also do have a Gmail now, so it's 80sreboot@gmail.com.
Very nice.
And don't forget our Facebook, which is facebook.com/80s Reboot.
And I am at Jesse Jackson DFW, and very proud to be doing at Set Lusting Bruce. It is our latest podcast for Southgate Media Group, and this all came because of this show. Because we talked 80s albums, and then we talked Bruce in the 80s, and now then I have a Bruce Springsteen show, and it's your... I give all credit to you, Dave.
So it's a spin-off. I love it.
Yes, it is, which is how 70s and 80ish. So for now, we're gonna thank you guys, and we will be back soon. Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.